In advance of a media call I did this morning around the Elizabeth Holmes sentencing, I did some research. Specifically, I reviewed some of the character reference letters that were turned in on her behalf. Now, let me admit, when I read some of these letters online, I actually thought it was a joke. I thought someone had hacked the court system and said and turned in these letters because it couldn't be real. People didn't actually write the things that they wrote. But upon further review, they were actually the real letters. They were actually turned in on her behalf. And I am stunned, shocked, I tell you, stunned. I said it twice. That's how stunned I really am. Stunned for the fourth time that her lawyers allowed these letters to be turned in. I cannot believe it. In this video, I'm going to articulate why the snippets of the letters that I read are horrendous, why I don't think they'll help her. And the great thing is, this knowledge isn't just coming from me. They're coming from subject matter experts, from federal judges we have interviewed, federal judges we have heard speak on stage. So I'm channeling their thoughts. Before I get into this video, quickly, my name is Justin Paperny, Director of White Collar Advice. So grateful that you're here. If you find value, please subscribe to this channel. Previously, our team we've covered a lot of the Elizabeth Holmes sentencing, from life in federal prison, what she can expect, a first day in prison, jobs in prison, how she can potentially get a shorter federal prison sentence by way of the probation interview. So we've covered it. And now we're continuing today with her horrendous, disastrous character reference letters. For some background, it was Judge Bennett in a video my business partner Michael Santos filmed with Judge Bennett. Judge Bennett said, the goal of a character reference letter follows. They should speak to the defendant's character, things they've done of value to help other people. They should identify with victims, lay out a clear path and plan to make amends. Judge Boo, whom we interviewed on YouTube, said the same thing. Specifically, he said, if you break my window, don't say, I'm sorry. What are the plans to fix the window? Now, some of you may be thinking she went to trial. She has nothing to make amends for. Therefore, how could she say, I'm sorry? I get it. Doesn't change that she should be articulating the pain that has been caused to other people, even if she doesn't think that she's responsible for it. It doesn't mean that she shouldn't be laying out a realistic vision of what she'll be doing the rest of her life. It doesn't mean that she alone shouldn't be articulating what she has done since learning that it was United States of America versus Elizabeth Holmes. Before I get into some of these specific letters, I'll remind you that it was Judge Boulware at a conference in San Diego who said the order of mitigation follows: the defendant, the lawyer, friends and family by way of character reference letters. Ms. Holmes appears to get it all backwards. She relies on the lawyers to write a sentencing memorandum that blames other people. They're required and paid to do it, and I hope they do it well. 2, she relies on friends and family to turn in 130 letters, which I believe is too many. They all get watered down in time because they all begin to say the same thing. She didn't have bad intentions. It was a legitimate business. It was Balwani. She hired experts. It was the victims who were big boys and girls who should have known what they were investing in. The lawyers are paid to victim blame. That's what they're paid to do. But it doesn't change that she's gotten the order of mitigation wrong, and she's relying on others to do the work that she herself should be doing. And the last judge I'll reference before we get into these letters is Judge Gonzalez Rogers, a federal judge in Oakland, who at a conference said a character reference letter can actually hurt a defendant. It could actually ensure they don't get what they want, which is a shorter prison sentence. Why? Judge Gonzalez Rogers said some character reference letters continue to enable the defendant. The letter helps show how the defendant got into this predicament in the first place. Aha. It's the reason my mom and dad wrote a letter, but my lawyer said, we ain't turning in this letter because it says exactly what you would expect a mom and dad to write. Justin didn't mean to do it. He didn't have bad intentions. He was working with the wrong people. It was too much pressure. It was too much money. It was too much opportunity at too young a time. It's a waste of money to send him to a minimum security camp at great taxpayer expense. He should be working and paying the victims back. Might be the parts of that are you could argue are true. I would argue I knew that it was wrong and I deserve to be held accountable without question, but my parents see it differently. But when you look at the letters that her parents turned in, they're real, not a joke. They essentially say the same thing, which is why her lawyer should have said, we ain't turning in this letter, or if we are turning in a letter on your behalf, it's going to be a fundamentally different message, because these letters, in my opinion, continue to enable Miss Holmes because they blame everybody else but herself for her current plight in life. And if you know my work, you've seen TikTok, White Collar Advice, our media, Dr. Phil, our books. I am biased. I'm on the side of the defendant. I believe we send too many people to prison in this country for sentences that are far too long, especially for those who truly make amends and say they're sorry. Forgive me if I'm spitting and getting all worked up, especially for those who lay out a real vision. So it's hard for me to say this. It's hard for me to say this against someone who is going through a brutal time, who is devastated, who I'm sure is in such pain thinking about this 24 hours a day. I get it. I lived it for more than 3 years. But the problem is she doesn't identify with the people that were hurt. Worse, if she's not allowed to say it because her lawyers say you got to shut up, it will jeopardize your judicial rights. Her letter should not have said it. That is a problem. And I am stunned her lawyers allowed them to turn it in. With that said, let's get into specifically what was a few things that were turned in. Let's start with her partner, Billy Evans. No doubt he said some things that are true. Of course. Is this the right message in a letter? The price Liz and our family pays for this process is not just the potential incarceration that you will decide. In ways large and small, the process itself has daily costs. This will follow us for the rest of our lives. There is no avoiding the scorn that accompanies Elizabeth Holmes. Well, he was willing to overlook it. Apparently, their friendship turned into a romance. 1, 2, is he the lawyer? I can assure you the sentencing memorandum that has been submitted essentially says the same thing. And of course, the judge knows the collateral consequences that follow a government investigation. A good lawyer will articulate all of the collateral consequences that follow a federal conviction. But is that the job of the character reference letter? According to Judge Bennett, who told us he doesn't care if the letter is written from a senator, or in this case, Senator Booker turned in a letter on her behalf. He doesn't care if it's written by someone rich, famous, a plumber, a gardener, electrician. It has to speak to the person's character. Does that paragraph by her partner speak to her? No, it's wasted space and her lawyer should have deleted it or said, we cannot turn this in. The problem is, I assure you, shouldn't say assure, it's a big word. I haven't read all of the letters. It is probably a theme that these letters enable her conduct, blame everybody else, and focus on how her own life is imploding, something the judge already knows. But you know what the judge would say in that response? Should have thought of that. Should have thought about that, Ms. Holmes, before you put the Pfizer logo on letterhead, giving the impression they had validated your technology, which is fraud that sends people to prison every single day. I'm angry because she has had ample time and ample money to spend preparing for sentencing. The longer she serves in prison makes it harder to pay back the victim she helped create. It's the wrong message. Shouldn't be in there. The mother, I'm sure she's got a great mom who loves her to death. And I'm sure the parents are in such pain that they're here and they sit around all day wondering, what could we have done differently? I'm sure they blame themselves, the opportunity, how is she here? What could we have done to avoid this? I get it. And I know they love her. But the reason my mom didn't turn in a letter is because she'd have said the same damn thing that Elizabeth Holmes' mom said, without question. Specifically, they get into blaming Balwani. How does that speak to her character? One would argue a YouTube subscriber reached out when they saw that comment and said, if anything, it speaks to her lack of judgment. I'm not going to get into that. I don't know what she was thinking when she was at Stanford 20 years ago. The point is it relevant in a character reference letter that the parents are going to discuss this? Does it speak to her character? I don't think so. I don't think so. She wrote, we noticed that our daughter, with whom we had always had a very close relationship and who had always been so open with us, quickly became a stranger. Our conversations no more open or interesting than those you have with a neighbor you hardly cared about. She went on to say she is living in a nightmare amid her daughter's trial. Here's the worst thing she said. The worst thing in this character reference letter is I empathize with her mother because it's brutal and it's painful. And I know what my prison term did to my mom. And I hope she's proud of me for working to make amends and help people accept responsibility. It's devastating. Her lawyers never should have allowed this. What a price she has paid for the failure of her dreams. I'm okay with that. Her own missteps. Oh, finally, some acceptance of responsibility. This is horrendous. And the mistakes of others she brought in and relied upon. Why is that in a letter? Are you the lawyer? You're the mom. No. You can speak about your suffering, the pain and shame that you feel. And in retrospect, you wish she had done things differently. But did you work at Theranos? Were you on the board? Were you there day to day? There's no upside, in my opinion, in continuing to use these character reference letters to blame and excuse her conduct. That speaks to what Gonzalez Rogers said this federal judge that it enables the conduct. It ain't your fault, Elizabeth. And people put this in writing. I think it's terrible. And then they kind of have what is the have your cake and eat it too. It's not her fault, but there were some missteps, right? She'll forever be associated with this failure. It happened when she was young. It's like good and bad. You can't have it both ways. I think it's terrible. Okay. Continuing on to the father, again, the same exact message. We did not like Balwani. His personality was brash at best, and he could be angry and demanding. And I'm sorry if that's the case, but how does that jeopardize the fact, or how does that excuse putting the Pfizer logo on letterhead and sending it out to people to give the impression that it was okay to invest in this? So the reason she should have pled guilty to, worst case, one kind of conspiracy to commit fraud, and she'd have probably gotten the 18 months home confinement or 2 years that her lawyers want. But the blaming and excusing, while it may make them feel better, and it may be cathartic, it does not advance her agenda, which is to get the shortest possible prison sentence. And last but not least, I'm not going to read the whole letter from the brother, but he says the same thing. He attributed much of Theranos' failures to the youth in reliance on Balwani. You know what a judge may say? If she was young, she shouldn't have accepted the responsibility to raise hundreds of millions of dollars. She was too young. We could pick apart these letters for days. We won't. I'll close by reminding you, not what I'm telling you. You may think I'm biased, I'm one side. What federal judges have told us on YouTube videos that you can watch. The only job of a character reference letter, and I'm going to put up a shameless plug if you want to enroll, it's free, totally free. Characterletters.com. The actual letters that were turned into the court on my behalf. And when you read them, you'll see why Judge Wilson, a tough judge, commented on the letters, because they speak to my character. Do her letters speak to her character? My letters don't blame other people. Her letters blame other people. My letters that you can read lay out a vision moving forward. What's her vision moving forward besides happy talk and what she will do? Has she done it? What are the plans for the rest of her life? How is she going to find a way to pay these people back? Didn't read about that in the letters. All I read is it was Balwani. She was young. It was a business, and a whole lot of victim shaming that I'm sure took place inside of these letters. So that's how I'll close. You want to read my letters and see what a best-in-class character reference letter looks like if you're a defendant traversing this wretched system? Go to characterletters.com. I predicted months ago Elizabeth Holmes will get 5 years in prison. A number of people have told me I don't think that's going to age well. Some people are saying 10 to 15 years. Certainly don't think she can get 18 months home confinement, because all things being fair, we had a client going recently to 2 years for tax fraud, a few $100,000, not paying his income taxes. Not good. Pled guilty. He's in prison for 2 years. The victim is the U.S. government, a few $100,000. They want more. The feds want $800 million in restitution, and her lawyers had the chutzpah to ask for 18 months of home confinement under the idea that she has suffered and she will pay for this for the rest of her life. You know what? Everyone who's gone through the system suffers. All of us as convicted felons into a reputational pain, the stigma that accompanies a felony conviction with the branded scarlet letter F on our chest for the rest of our life. But with a plan and hard work and integrity and discipline and somehow finding a way to make amends, we can overcome, as everyone on our team has done. I'm working every day to make amends. Sam on our team, Larry, Michael Santos, my mentor. I'm an ambassador for his message. We have all done it, not by blaming and excusing, by finally looking into the mirror and saying, I made bad decisions, I want to do better. When Elizabeth Holmes does that, and I suspect it will come from federal prison after her appeal is denied, she may get there. Until then, having others enable her is not a good message, and I don't think it's going to help her at her sentencing tomorrow.